guys. Declare the meeting open, and 1.1, in accordance with Local Government Act 1993, Cowra Council is recording this meeting and will upload the recording to Council's website. By speaking at this meeting, you agree to being recorded and having that recording published in the public domain. Please ensure that when you speak at meetings, you are respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Cowra Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made in the course of this meeting. 1.2, we would acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Wiradjuri people, and pay our respect to elders both past and present. Apologies and applications for leave of absence by councillors. The councillors are all present. We have an apology from the Director of Corporate Services, Mr. Jones. And we have, I think, the Director of Infrastructure of Environmental Services who's joining us. Yes. So, yep. So, someone to move the apology for the Director of Corporate Services be accepted. Councillor Downing, Councillor Fagan, thank you. I put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried. Item 1.4, disclosures of interest. I'd indicate that invite councillors and staff to indicate in relation to any interest you need to declare. A, what report or item you are declaring interest in. B, whether the interest is pecuniary or non-pecuniary. And C, what is the nature of that interest. It appears there are none. We have no presentations and we have no members of the public seeking to talk to us in open forum. So we'll go to item 2, which is a confirmation of the minutes of the General Committee meeting held June 13, 2023. This is 2 minutes, which is one of the confidential minutes. Move both those minutes. Someone to move they be adopted, please. The true record. Councillor Watt, Councillor Delbo, Councillor Fagan. Councillor Fagan. Any comments or questions on that? No comments or questions. I put the recommendation they be signed as a true and accurate record. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried. At page 18, we might have to Director of Corporate Services or the Acting Director. Council note the investments in the financial report 2020 June 2023. The report there. I move that recommendation. Something different. Councillor Judy Smith, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Delbo. Comments or questions? Seconder, got any comments?
Through the Chair, I'd like to thank the staff for compiling this report. I actually undertook some training last week, excellent training, and one of the things I learnt from last week's training on investments specifically that under the Local Government Act 212, Part 2, the report must be made up to the last day of the month immediately preceding the meetings. I spoke to the author, Scott Elson, about this today and a few other inquiries that I had, and noted that the investment portfolio on page 20 is as of at the 5th of July 2023, and I read into that it wasn't the 30th of June, but he has since confirmed with me that it is actually those figures on those page are as at the 30th of June. And as a result, I suggested that going forward in this report that we actually note the date of the last date of the month for each of the investment reports that we do receive in front of us. And just want to thank Council for allowing me to do the training. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Further comments, Councillor Roy?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try and answer that. I won't put that on Ken as Acting Director. I did have a brief... No, I don't need Councillor Rod. I did have a brief conversation with our Finance Manager about that because I think the same was raised at our last meeting. He indicated to me that under the provisions of our investment policy, we can only lodge a maximum of 20% with any institution that has the A, or whatever the A rating, or whatever the relevant rating is within our portfolio. And as it turns out, the on-call rate is equal to or better than the other rates that the staff have been seeking to procure. So we've got investments with 5 or 6 different institutions. Can't put any more with them, with any of those institutions. So the comparative rates are no more advantageous than the on-call rate. So it's been left in the on-call account. He did indicate to me that the day after I think this report was printed, was $5 or $6 million that was placed on investment, which I'm sure will appear in the post 30 June will appear in the next report. But that's the rationale as to why it's in there at 30 June. Oh, I didn't ask that question.
Financial assistance grant.
Could be partly the early advance payment of 100% of this year's financial assistance grant could contribute to it. That certainly wouldn't be all of it. Wouldn't be probably half of it, but there'd be a fair proportion of it.
Other comments? Right reply. Put the recommendation. Those in favour? Against, declare it carried. And delighted to hear, Councillor Delbo, that the training course was worthwhile and interesting. Good. You'd encourage others to do it.
Yes, it was an online course, one-on-one, so you could do it at your own pace. Yep.
4.1. My iPad's frozen a bit, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, 4.1. Yeah. 4.1? Yeah.
I'll move this.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move this.
Thank you.
And Nick is.
Second? Councillor Kiss, thank you. Okay. You speak, Councillor.
This is something we've done quite a few times, but I was just wondering if we could take on notice, if I could get the Director of Planning to give us a list of the places that have taken advantage of this over the last 3 or 4 years, because I think it's really, this is an incentive scheme for businesses and organisations to provide easy access for our town. It's been the first few years we were offering pay half. We weren't offering very much, so we didn't get a lot of take up. Now we're offering to pay $5,000, up to $5,000 with an incentive as well, which is great, and I think that's been a big help. But I'm not quite sure whether that's been a big take up, and I think we probably need to just look at that and see if it's really working. I know quite a few places have taken it up. The Data Voice, Telstra Shop, and the Coles building have both done that, but it'd be interesting to see how many places are actually taking it up, and how, if we need to incentivise it further or just offer, one-offs or something. I'd just like a bit more of a detailed information about it if I could. That would be great. I'm happy to move it, and I think it's a really good project, but I would like to see a bit more how it's working, and if we can improve it, or if we're not getting a very good take-up, we should probably promote it a bit more. Thank you.
Second, wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Director Larissa and staff for updating the Access Incentive Scheme. As Councillor Fagan says, it's been around for quite some time. I'd like to add that last year we also provided the Access Incentive Fund for the tennis courts as well. So that was really good, just to provide that, which also doubled then for the electoral voting as well, so that people can get into there. And look, I think it's important to note as well that as the policy says, it's actually against law to discriminate against people with a disability in relation to access and use of public premises, and council's acknowledging that by providing this funding for the businesses and community groups, it's to help them achieve their legal responsibilities, but ultimately just create a more inclusive community. And also to be mindful too that retrospective changes can be a very costly process. I mean, we'd much prefer to see things done up front the right way, but this is some form of assistance to at least help people to participate in our community more fully. Thank you.
further comments? I a couple of questions, if I may. Sorry, if I may. Firstly, and I did raise this to the director, is it possible to either have something which has got the track changes or a copy of the previous policy, please, so we can actually see what the... Thank you. And the other one was, and the same, ditto for the next report, so I won't repeat myself twice. The other one was in page 33 on item 3.1, which is eligible projects. The first introduction talks owners, lessees, building agents or of buildings and other facilities are invited to apply, and then when you go down a couple of dot points, projects eligible to apply if, and it says if the applicant is, and I'm not quite sure those two phrases actually mesh, if that makes sense, that the not-for-profit community organisation, local incorporated community group, perfect, local business, local community service provider, it doesn't really sort of clarify the issue around building agents or owners of buildings and so forth who may want to apply irrespective of who the tenant is. But the rest I think is brilliant, thank you. If we can make that kind of little adjustments, just to, one reflects the other. And so, Councillor Downing, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the idea of this policy is important, and I consider that it actually would have been a very progressive policy for 2005 when it was introduced. So whilst I'm supporting the premise, I can't go past the fact that the policy hasn't been reviewed for 18 years. While it clearly states that the review is to be completed at least every 4 years. In my opinion, it's not good enough for our community. I actually think that if you want to be a leader, you must understand that leadership isn't a badge. It's not a promotion. It's not a title. It's a behaviour, and you have to set the standards. And the standards you walk past are the standards that you set. So during the 18 years that have been gone past since this was introduced, 4.5 times councillors could have had the opportunity to review, revisit, and reframe this policy. In 2013, when the NDIS was legislated, there was hyper awareness around the disability sector. Council also took a substantial loan out to refurbish the footpaths in 2 blocks of the CBD in 2020. Both of those occasions would have been great times to review a policy such as this. So Council has, to partly answer Councillor Fagan's question, Council has put aside over $40,000 in the past 3 years for this budget. 2023, none of this budget was spent. 2022, none of the budget was spent. And in 2021, $612 was spent. So I feel we probably need to have a greater discussion about this policy, and is it working and is it achieving what it could? Because I'd say no. Let's begin with the amount on offer. Is this enough? We are fully aware that from our own budgets, that the value of $5,000 for these types of projects is nothing compared to 18 years ago. Or has it been changed within the review? Because I don't have a copy of the old policy to compare it with, so I wasn't sure. How are we as a council promoting it? How can the community access it? We've had many discussions, and we're discussing again how we communicate effectively. In my research, I found one business owner who used this grant. They were told by a councillor of the time. I can't find it on the website, although I tried. If anyone can, that'd be helpful if they could tell me where to go. So I want to know, what do we gain from this policy? Can we use policies such as this to complement our disability action plan and work towards effectively addressing the challenges that persons with disabilities contend with in our town and villages? This policy is not really helping to rectify our access issues if no one's using it. I feel this would be an excellent policy for the new CBD committee to take and run with, promoting it to the business community. And if we're not going to use the money, it seems a waste to put it aside when there are other very worthy projects around accessibility, like the caravan park, a cabin, and also an all-access park, which the community would greatly need. So moving forward, considering the time frame on this review, I'd like to request that each councillor be given a list of council policies in alphabetical order and with dates of adoption and dates for review for our future reference. Thank you.
Further comments? Yeah, right.
Thank you. Before we get a bit too critical about what's in this policy and what we should look at what was there before, because it mightn't have changed very much. A lot of it is revolves around legislation from state and federal government, and it is a necessary thing. And I support Councillor Downey's suggestion that this could be something that the CBD committee could take forward. I know the wine bar, Exdale and Grey, it got money there to put its sliding door in when they were renovating. There has been some things, but and I suppose it's up to the owners of the building to also know what their obligations are. We shouldn't have to go and tell them all the time. That leads me to a question that says public buildings. Does that mean all businesses or just public buildings that council own? Or is it just any buildings that the public enter? So, yeah, no, it's something that can be worked on, and this disability access is an ongoing issue because Councillor Kiss said retrofitting things can be very expensive, and wheelchairs are getting wider and bigger, and you need more room to turn around. And I think it was looked at in the footpath thing, and some of the problems was that some of the shop owners didn't want it because they upset their access or something. But so it wasn't all our fault that we didn't do it. But I agree that perhaps we could have done more at the time. Thank you.
Councillor Bell, are you?
Oh, yes,
I
thank
thought
you.
were, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I look forward to hearing from the community. It is going out for a minimum of 28 days public consultation, so I encourage all community members to read the document and to participate and provide feedback to us so we can include everybody in this plan. And my personal comment would be that I think the cap of 5,000, although there is a line that says that the committee can choose a greater amount if they wish, I believe the cap of 5,000 may be too small considering the price to actually fix things these days. So that's, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Watt, you were.
Thank you. I also, I have to admit, as a councillor, was surprised when I read this program because I didn't know that it was something that we had in policy. I think it's a fantastic policy, and as Councillor Downing said, would have been a very progressive one when it was brought in 2005. But I think it's disappointing that I think perhaps probably many of us around the room were also not aware of it beforehand, and to see that only one business had taken it up in the past 3 years for me is quite it's disappointing, because I think in 2020 when we did the CBD renewal, I imagine there were a number of businesses who would have benefited from this, and perhaps in the last few years there have been a number of businesses who've taken it on themselves at significant cost that could have been supported by us. I think I'm probably still just a bit shocked by Councillor Downing's comments, because I think we need a genuine review of this policy before we put it out to the community, and I'd like to propose that we postpone this until the next month for us to provide some feedback to the department and get some more information about who's used it over the past 18 years, and look into some ways that it can be more effective, and particularly look into whether the $5,000 is enough, and if there's ways that we can work with the community to make it work better. So I'd like to propose a motion that we postpone this.
What
I'm
you're
looking for.
Yep. Doing is,
Thank you.
what I would suggest you doing is you either foreshadow a motion or move an amendment.
Yes.
And I think the amendment would be the cleaner way to go. So
Do you want to give me the words for that amendment, perhaps, Bill?
That the amendment will simply be that the matter be deferred to the next council, to the next committee meeting in August.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks.
how we go from here is, look, we've had a fair conversation around it. Anybody wish to make further comments?
I presume this policy would be written in regards to current legislation. We would be compliant with current legislation.
With Chair, yes, it is. It has been updated to reflect the current legislation.
And the report indicates that. It was the mood of the committee to defer it, so be it, but some of the comments that have been made are made out of probably a lack of information as what may have transpired in the past and how this may have been publicised and promoted in the past. And if it's a council in the past have gone to try and get businesses to engage in this particular incentive, if you like, and it's up to businesses to some extent to engage. And I know there has been some significant publicity over years to get people to engage in this. Any inference that council hasn't been active in trying to pursue this or to get the message out there is, I think, a little bit incorrect. The date on the policy review would give you a valid comment, but doesn't mean to say that it's just been left sit idle and no one has actually looked at it or worked with it and been aware of it. I know the Access Committee in particular have been fully aware of these sorts of policies. I note the comment about the policies, and that's something the General Manager made a note of the number of policies that we have out there. But I think council has also a responsibility to make themselves familiar with the policies. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. I see no reason why this shouldn't go on public exhibition as it is now, and we can still review it in 28 days' time. And in that 28 days, we have a chance to get answers to the questions that we think we need in one form or another. And in 28 days, if we decide to, because we have the chance as councillors, we have the opportunity to make changes at the council meeting in 28 after the 28 days community engagement. So we're not adopting it, we're sending a public exhibition, which to me seems perfectly sensible and perfectly logical. And the fact that it's taken this long, you'd argue that it's an incentive to get it out there pretty quickly now and get it to the community to come back with their ideas and their conversation about what they think, and it gives us councillors a chance to get the information they think they're missing and talk to senior staff about it. Councillor Smith?
Just a question about what you were saying. If we decide to vary, for example, the upper limit of the amount that we're prepared to co-fund after the 28 days on public exhibition, unless it's a request from the public that we're accepting, would we then need to take that back again to the public?
It comes back to council for adoption, but at that point, council can make any amendments or changes they say that they sought to change, including the limit, or and I read the limit, or take the limit out and put other wording in, and that's something we'll drop out of the public consultation. And you write a reply. Well, we've had a conversation about the subject, so we won't debate it formally, but I'll put the amendment to start with. And then the amendment that determines whether the move of the original motion, at that point, move the original motion gets right reply. Once the amendment's put.
Sorry, I didn't see who seconded the amendment.
Councillor Downing. All right. No? So I'll put, if everybody, we've been a bit loose on the debate, but everybody.
Just a question, please.
We'll put the amendment first and we'll come back.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
With regards to the upper limit of money, that's really not going to change the policy. That'd be something that we could change that policy any time we like, wouldn't it?
Council can change the policy if council any time it so wishes.
Yeah, but it's not going to. It won't change the intent, though.
No.
Thank you.
No, and can change it when it comes back from public exhibition. Yeah. Question, yeah.
Just to call you out on your comment about that no one has looked at it. You're saying that council can change a policy whenever they want, but if it doesn't come back for another 18 years, that won't get changed. So that's my
No,
point.
there's no,
So it doesn't matter who pulls it out and looks at it, it matters what happens in the chamber
I'm not
and
gonna,
what we see.
I'm not gonna debate with you what I did or
I'm
didn't
not
say,
debating,
but-
I'm just saying.
But the answer is, to Councillor Wright's question, is that the council can change a council policy.
Yes,
Didn't
but
say
if
they
it
had-
doesn't
no,
come to the
doesn't-
council,
doesn't-
it can't
Well,
be
it's the
changed.
council responsibility, senior staff, is the fact is, council can change the policy. That's state. That's it. Whether it comes to, whether it comes to us or not, it's another matter. But we have the capacity to change the policy, which is, I think, where Councillor Wright's going.
Can I speak against the
Well, no,
amendment?
I put the amendment, you want to speak against the amendment?
I just want to speak against the
Well, take
amendment.
against the amendment.
I'm just speaking against the amendment because I think, as the mayor's outlined, we have 28 days to come back with our suggestions for this policy. I was a bit surprised that it said 2005 because we've seen this policy quite a few times in different forms. I'm not sure it's never actually been debated as far as changed or anything, but we have raised the amount. I know we didn't have $5,000 in the beginning, and I know it was a different way of doing it. It has been very heavily promoted by the by the Access Committee, very heavily promoted. And I know when Gary Starr was involved, he would go to every business in the main street and try and get them to access his fund. So, it has been heavily promoted. The incentive is not really the problem, it's the will of the businesses or the people involved that want to do it, because it is quite a difficult thing to retrofit your doorways to an accessibility level. So it has been heavily promoted. We haven't had a lot of take up, but I was surprised to see that we haven't spent any money, because I know at least 6 businesses in town who have accessed this fund. So I'm very surprised it's not in the budget. And I'm also surprised that we've had, when we did up the main street, there was like 17 different businesses that actually got it wasn't provided as funding through this fund, but we did make sure there were 17 different businesses up the main street that became more accessible because of the raising of the street and the levels that we put in the footpath. So that was a big thing for the changing to the streetscape, and it was a major part of our upgrade. That was one of the things that we really wanted to do. So we have been active in making places more progressively accessible, but I'm a bit surprised that it's been since 2005, because I know about this incentive, and I know it's been accessed by quite a number of businesses in the town, and that's why I asked for the report, because I'm surprised that we haven't had. And I'd also like to think that we can promote it, and if $5,000 isn't enough, we need the report to come back to be able to make that decision. So I haven't got enough information to change tonight, but I think it should go out on display. It should be the Access Committee could come back and talk to us about it. We should know exactly, the report should come back and tell us what's been used, how much money we've been funded, and if there's more money. I think there was one time when we actually raised the amount of money because it was a larger job. I don't know about the tennis club or something. We did raise the money because they didn't have enough. So, it's fairly flexible. It's not set in stone, but I do know that it has been done in quite a number of places. So I'd look forward to ask Larissa to give us a report, and then we can make a decision about what we're going to do about it.
Any further comments at all? I've been lenient. I'll put. I thought you had. Okay. Yep. No, you got it. You speak. I've said everybody. I'm being lenient because you got to speak.
I would just like to say that the figures came from the finance department today. So I'm not sure what's been done in the past. I kind of worried about what's happening in the future. And this is before us, and we're addressing it as I've addressed it, as I've seen fit. But yeah, good job for what you've done.
Thank you. Unless somebody's got an urgent comment, let's try and.
Can I just have a point of clarification,
Yeah,
please?
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So on page 30, we have the revision history, the table. And so it's been once to council. If it had been back into council, would it appear in that table? Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. With that, I'll put the amendment first. Those in favour of the amendment. Those in favour of the motion. Sorry, those against the amendment. and declare the amendment lost. Councillor Fagan, you've got a right to reply if you wish to exercise it.
No, I don't. I'm fine. Thank you.
Therefore, I will put the original motion, which still stands. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. 4.2 is the draft policy, 28 days exhibition again for the renaming of bridges, roads, streets and places policy. The recommendation there, 2 dot points. Councillor Smith, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Fagan, thank you. Councillor Smith, you wish to speak?
Thank you. This is one policy that has been updated recently, so that's positive. And I don't think, from my memory of the last policy, there's not a lot of significant change. One of the significant changes may well be the increased emphasis on the propriety of the use of Aboriginal names, which is very welcome. But I think a lot of this is determined by the Geographical Names Board, and we know that they're very, very strict about what we can and what we can't do. We can't use possessive apostrophes in people's names. We can't name something after a still living person, all that sort of thing. We've had issues with a number of those restrictions before, but it is an important policy, and I do recommend that we put it out to public exhibition.
Seconder to speak?
Just to say that even though we have a policy and we like to name things after different, when we come up with names, it's very difficult to get them accepted by the Geographical Names Board, even if we follow the guidelines. They really don't like things that are a bit different, and we have had lots of opportunities in the past to name things that we'd like to name them, but they actually reject them quite often. So although we have a policy, it's not actually a lot of the time we don't get our own way in naming things, and it has to go to the Geographical Names Board and they reject them. So we have a policy, but it doesn't mean that it's actually going to work. So we'll put out, as it's required, we need to go out in 28 days publication and just see what happens. Thank you.
Further comment? Larissa, do you want to speak at any sort of provide any overview of what changes have been, or you don't mind? Okay.
The main reason that this policy has had to come up is that the Geographic Names Board have actually released their own new policy as to how we approach the naming of roads, places and objects within our community. So more than anything, it is just purely an update to reflect the correct legislation.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to thank the government for their assistance. Their help is always so welcome and helps us with our recalcitrant ways. I've just got a query on 41.1 where you can't have any more than 25 characters, and except of course the Aboriginal language. And that brings me to my point that as the Aboriginals didn't write a language, who decided how to spell the words that were only vocalised, not written?
That's a rhetorical question. I think it's a good question, but
Well, I've just seen some very strange spelling of words that have made things very difficult, and I just wondered who it is that decides how things are spelled. No one knows? Oh, well,
Perhaps that can be a question for our cultural awareness training coming up.
that's a good question. Yeah.
if the our friends, the government, could possibly assist us with that, I'll be very welcome. I know they're here to help.
And lucky we're not in Ireland. Councillor Young?
That was actually my point, that who actually wrote down anything and told us to spell anything, Paul?
All right. Any further, Councillor Watt?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that it's a really fantastic policy to have, that we name streets in response to people who've contributed to society. And for a very long time, those streets have been named on behalf of a particular group of people, predominantly being white men. And I think it's fantastic that this policy broadens it to include other people in there. And particularly, I think it would be fantastic for Cowra to expand it to be not just reflections of an older group and particular group, but to reflect a broad piece of society. We've done that a little bit, as we can see through Tokyo Terrace and a number of streets that are named in relation to our strong connection with the Japanese community, but it would be fantastic to see that extended. I think critiquing the way a particular group of people name areas is hugely problematic, and I just want to make sure that that is, for anyone listening tonight, that's heard, that that's not the reflective view of council, that we all have a problem with how they've spelt their names. I think that if you went to any other country or any other community, you'd probably have difficulty saying the names the first couple of times, and I think it's on us to learn the way that people in our community pronounce things, and particularly the way that they name significant parts of where we live, considering that they were the traditional custodians and still are.
Further comments?
Yeah, no, I support this, and just in regards with if we were to use Aboriginal names, I would no doubt think that it will be in consultation with the local Aboriginal board or council, whoever is at the time, whoever's the spokesperson of those people that will okay it, because we're in no position to call something an Aboriginal name, because what we think it is could be different, and it won't be easy, but I think the way things are moving at the moment, we take small steps that could happen, but you'd have to have them on side before you could change any of that. Choose a name, I would think.
This is a good policy which has been driven to some extent by what council wants to do, but also by the Geographical Names Board, which has been the bane of many councils' existence for quite some time. I think the council in the past has taken into consideration the need to have naming of streets and buildings and bridges and infrastructure in a diverse manner, and I think this policy indicates that, and I have no doubt this council is keen to see that does take place, that naming is from a diverse range. But I look around the streets in Cowra, there are a lot of streets around Cowra that are not anything to do with any gender, but with some other sort of part of the world around us. So I think we need to be careful. We just don't focus on what we think may have happened in the past by people who are in this chamber. We don't know what reason or what the rationale was behind decisions. I think the important thing is what we're doing and how we're trying to drive it forward. And I think we do accept and do understand the need for more diversity and being more cautious how we name things, but also that it needs to reflect our community. Such responsibilities council now has. So the baton is now handed to this council. So these policies are important to us because we need to make sure that they are manageable, that they're flexible where need be, but we can actually have something which reflects the community, but the will of the council as well. And I think this does. And what I'm seeing around the chamber, I think it'll be accepted. It does accept and recognise that, and we shouldn't be focusing on too much on the past, but focus on where we are and how we go forward and resolve issues. Further comments? Right reply?
Thank you. Spelling has always been an issue, and one of the reasons that some people spell Smith with a Y or indeed an E on the end is that a lot of people who first came to Australia, excluding the Indigenous inhabitants, didn't know how to spell. So when someone wrote their names down, they were all sorts of different spellings. So it's not only Indigenous names that can be difficult to spell. And for those who weren't on council at the time, council's inclination for the new streets around the Tokyo Terrace area was that Indigenous names be used, and they were proposed. They were put out for consultation, of course, to the as per the Aboriginal consultation policy and so on. And the resounding answer was no, that was not thought to be appropriate. So hence they're now Sol Street, Tokyo Terrace, etc. And finally, although I hope no one from the government is listening to this, council has in the past informally refused to agree with the Geographical Names Board naming procedures. So we have, for example, out at Darby's Falls, Lynn Sawyer's Reserve, which is named after a very important woman still living out there, and was something that was very important to the Darby's community. So council provided the signage, council went out there to the opening, but it's not official, unfortunately. The only other thing that I would say that is very important about this policy is the list of organisations that need to know when a place name is created or changed: ambulance, emergency services, etc.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. There are no late items. No confidential matters. No matters of urgent business. I can declare the meeting closed. Thank you.